in a world that is so kind of cold. And but yeah, I guess I really wanted to have something else to talk about in the news, but unfortunately there just kind of isn't anything other than these two shootings that happened.
And you would think they would run out of things to talk about regarding these, but
and that's kind of the point of how I want to tackle this. So I'm sure you all know there was a shooting in El Paso, Texas, and one in Dayton, Ohio. And I think what has been the most striking element of this to me is everybody you see on TV, and I'm. It's hard for me to say this, but like just because I'm trying to play this as fair as possible. But the ones who currently are being more toxic about it, to me personally, is the left, and I think it's mostly just because they dominate more of the media space than the right. But so I deleted Twitter off my phone because I just couldn't.
I did too.
I couldn't take it anymore, and then also, but at my gym, it's like you can even just see the chyrons. They have all the different news channels going.
Yeah.
And then it's almost as if these people reporting on it are happy it happened because the one in El Paso fit their narrative they could run with. Mm-hmm. And what's so clear to me is that they don't, because I was saying to Sean that like good's not the right word, but there's I don't have the correct word for this, but it's like I almost am in a weird way grateful.
You're hopeful
that it happened, that both sides of the political spectrum were the ones that ended up being violent, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality is that violence, the narrative, or the reason why someone ended up doing this stuff from a political angle is completely fucking irrelevant. Mm-hmm. And there seems to be a complete lack of curiosity as to why this keeps happening. But It's like, the idea that you're using this for a political slam dunk is so fucking gross.
Yeah. It's not human. It really, it's playing into a team rather than into the lives that have been lost or will continue to be lost because of these shootings.
And what's so interesting to me is like, so I've done a lot of thinking about, because I think what's been striking to me even before this one happened, and then the Garlic Festival and before that, I mean, this is just right. And I don't even remember which one was before, but they all have been 25 and under. I mean, very young kids, and it's like, and all men, young men, and so what would make someone do something like this other than utter and complete desperation? And so, what's amazing to me is that there's no. So, I mean, Trump came out and said he had a few stupid takes, but generally speaking, I mean, he did condemn the white nationalists. I don't know how many times he has to say it. That's kind of the thing that's getting exhausting. It's like if you are a white nationalist, you're not going to say you're not. You know what I mean? But it's like, then they're looking for all these different angles. Like the craziest one, like no joke, like a absolute check mark on Twitter. So he said that he would lower the flags, and they lower it for 4 days. The day the flag's getting re-raised is on August 8th. 88. Which is HH in the alphabet, so Heil Hitler. So now that's a racist dog whistle. And it's like, Jesus Christ, guys. And like, again, if you're somebody who is relegated to a very dark part of the internet, right? And I think that for all these people, they want to die. And I think that is something that we should be curious about. Like, what is going on in somebody's life that makes them want to die? And I think that this is just a more sensational way of killing yourself, where you will have your name immortalized and CNN will read your manifesto live on air, show your face, show who you were, tell the whole world about your political ideology, and then because you're so concerned with getting a slam dunk against Trump, you're willing to not care about the lives that are lost, but just wall-to-wall, 24-hour a day, 7-day a week coverage about how Trump speaks about things is what makes young men so miserable they go and kill multiple people in a Walmart or in a bar.
I'm so amazed that networks have not caught on to the fact that showing the killer's face and showing their manifesto or reading their manifesto is so fucking terrible.
At this point, Sean, they know, but it's two things. Number one, their propaganda for a political machine. This should should be so, and because both of the shooters had different political ideologies that were completely opposite. CNN's not talking about Dayton, Ohio.
Of course they aren't. No.
And to Fox News' credit, there's actually it's actually interesting. I don't watch Sean Hannity because I think that he's a propagandist for the right, but I hate to say this to you guys. I know I've said this a few times. The sanest response came from Tucker Carlson, because Tucker Carlson was trying to lay it out the day before. Then he got everyone saying Tucker Carlson's part of this white supremacy problem. And then he put out this response, kind of an answer to it. And I think that it was the sanest response that I heard. And I think it's important for you guys all to hear it too. Again, you don't have to like this man. There's a lot about him I don't like, but I think that this was the most honest response to the whole thing. And I think it was worth sharing.
Yeah, it's still muted.
So we want to take a second to pass on a sincere message to official Washington, and particularly to our colleagues on the other cable news channels. And it's this: please, for the sake of the nation, calm down.
Yep.
Yes, America has problems. Yes, racism is one of America's problems. But so is a fading middle class. So is a terrifying drug epidemic that's killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. So is a national debt that is growing by $1 trillion a year. These are huge problems. And people know that. People know their country is in decline. And it's making them turn to new political leaders. Donald Trump was one of those new leaders. Elizabeth Warren and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are a couple of others. This is a time of frustration, and it's a time of change. It's a hard time for America. But this country is not on the brink of genocide. It's not even close to that. This is not a white supremacist country plotting the slaughter of its own people. It's a kind country full of decent people of all races who, like all people everywhere, make bad decisions from time to time, but they mean well and they generally try their best. So going forward, give them the benefit of the doubt, even when you disagree with them, maybe especially when you disagree with them. These are your fellow Americans. Cut them a break. They deserve it. And remember, the alternative is disaster.
Yep.
And it sucks because it sucks to have to look to Tucker Carlson for sanity. But I think a point you made earlier is that
really quickly, just on that end, like, he strikes me as somebody, and I give him so much credit for having Tulsi on, Fox News hosting Bernie's town hall, hosting Buttigieg's town hall. Mm-hmm. Like, that statement to me was of concern for what is to come if the rhetoric doesn't de-escalate from the media. Mm-hmm. Like, because I don't know what else Trump has to say at this point. Like, I don't know what he could say at this point. And again, like, for him to use the boomer gaming argument, dude, number one, like, so many of your fucking fans are gamers, and this has been fucking disproven years ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm sorry. I just wanted to...
I mean, that's fine. I don't really have anything else to add. You kind of...
Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah.
I mean, and he also brings up a really good point. And I said this to Sean before we started the podcast, which is like, the person who feels this level of desperation is the same person that's buying OxyContin. Like, there are really unhappy people in this country. And I think I had this thing in our shared podcast note that said, do we really want a utopia? And I think that the humans' creation of what we think utopia isn't good for humans. And so we thought by creating social media, we would create a utopia. We'll all be connected. We'll all be able to talk to each other. We'll all say good things to each other. We'll be able to share ideas. Then we start to relegate to our own tribal corners, and we find different people who can support really bad ideas that we have. And no one's and then you don't need to talk to real humans anymore that may challenge your ideas because they see you face to face and feel empathy with your situation and be like, Sean, I'm very concerned with what you're saying right now. But even people in person are now being radicalized by the rhetoric they're saying on Twitter because they're bad. Like, their ideas are getting validated so seriously that people are unable to have nuanced conversations about anything anymore without it turning into a battle, because everyone feels like they're a warrior in some kind of war that's not happening. But if you keep acting like this, you're going to create one. Mm-hmm. And I think that social media and the way that people use it, I can't expect basic people to understand that concept. I think everybody listens to this understands how social media doesn't really make most of us feel good, right? But the media, I think, is solely responsible for this stuff happening, because I mean, just the absolute check marks I have seen on Twitter that are journalists saying that anybody who voted for Donald Trump is a white supremacist. And get this, Julian Castro's brother, Joaquin Castro, released all of the Trump donors' names and their addresses.
Whoa.
As like, under the guise of saying, I'm outing white supremacists. And even there was a CNN host, I forgot his name, sorry, who said, don't you think this is dangerous? Like, in fairness to him, the information is technically public. But again, having a big politician end up pushing that information out to the public, to his followers that are rabid enough to care about that information, is fucking dangerous. But there seems to be, they are so consumed with winning, they don't really care who dies in the process. And I think that this event is absolute proof that there are, like, so, okay, let me take a step back. You guys, we got a lot of our followers from these last two debates, which were ponderous, and we are so grateful to have all of you. And we hope we're having opinions that you share. But again, as I said about, I don't remember what it was, but like taking these events and using them as a slam dunk for your political side is so fucking gross.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, because that just gets you further and further away from asking, why is this happening? And I think we all, again, so I think it's why people, like, so male suicides are through the fucking roof right now. Heroin overdoses are through the fucking roof. People are unhappy, and especially men. And if you're unhappy and you feel like nothing is going to happen to make your life better, you're going to do desperate, horrible things, whether that's stealing from people, to fulfill your habit, to take drugs and make you not feel anything, or so far gone that you end up deciding that human life isn't valuable and you'd rather kill strangers or kill yourself, or both. It seems like is kind of the case with a lot of these. And as evidenced by the one in Dayton, killed his sister in the process. And yeah, I don't know. This whole thing is just so exhausting in the way that everyone is talking about it, and no one's clean on this. Like I have seen, pro MAGA people. There are only folks on the Dayton shooter, and then trying to find any angle to, well, in the manifesto, the El Paso shooter said he was, thought the climate was a problem. Therefore, he's probably. I'm just like, shut the fuck up.
None of that
and start to be fucking curious for 5 minutes, just like, because if you have no curiosity about problems, you're never going to fucking fix them. But if you're just using it to win, you're just going to keep losing. And whether or not that's like losing an election, who gives a fuck at this point? But like losing lives or having people live in terror is a loss for all of us.
Yeah. It has made certain things in a way scarier. I mean, I've expressed concern in grocery stores, just because you can't at this point, you can't really trust people because of how far we've pushed them.
Right.
And I think especially with young men, it comes to the point of like, they've been banished from everywhere.
And even to go back to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, think about how young men are written about constantly. It is just constantly negative. It's mansplaining. It's manspreading.
That's what I mean. It's banishment from not just message boards, not just Twitter, not just like Instagram or whatever, but they've been banished from society, really. I mean, the way the media talks about young men, calling them mansplainers, calling them white supremacists, they are banished from every other aspect of our lives. They're just not accepted anymore.
Yeah.
And the more we banish them, the more extreme they become.
Right. And
they find niches like on the internet, and you'll find message boards where a white supremacist or a shooter, just in general, appears.
Right.
And nobody takes any of these warnings or these signs seriously.
Right. And that's ultimately, I think, what it causes these people to happen is there's not like a father figure who sees a problem and goes, Sean, I am very concerned with the behavior that I'm seeing, and I care a lot about you. Will you please tell me what's going on?
Yeah.
or if it's beyond even that point, having them institutionalized if they're showing certain levels of behavior. There's no one in these people's life, and it's pretty evident. Like when you look at all these different shooters, like the dad is virtually not present.
They're always missing at least a parent most of the time.
Right.
The dad.
And but also are on different psychiatric medicines, and I don't really want to even go into what the cause of or that is. Another thing that I think some of you who know me better would expect me to talk about is guns. I'm uninterested in this particular issue. I mean, I think that a lot of you know that I'm very pro, and I really don't see restriction as being helpful. And mostly why I'm not taking an angle on this is I don't know how to solve this problem, because there are 400 million guns in this country, and so the idea of you eradicating any of them is such a lofty, bizarre goal, and again takes us further away from asking why.
Right.
And
you said before it's focusing on the how, and the buck does not stop at how.
No.
There's so much more beyond that.
Yes. Yeah. I'm really fucking concerned.
Yeah.
And especially because they both had different ideologies. And again, it was just like the absolute failure of the media to unfortunately talk like Tucker just did. You know, which is just like, calm down. Like we're like, and also I think he made such a good point of saying we're mostly all good people who want good things from each other. But because you want this man out so badly, you're willing to not talk about that. And that is so depressing. And it's just going to these things are just going to keep happening. And what concerns me is there's a big event coming up in Portland in about a week and a half. In about a week and a half or 2 weeks, and Oregon's a weird state because Portland's very liberal, but the surrounding area is not, and they're well armed. And I'm concerned that it'll be like the Battle of Portland, and then this will start some sort of civil war scenario.
What date is that going to happen?
I'm not exactly sure. You all can look it up. I mean, I'm basically going to just like turn my phone off that day or something, but I'm very concerned about it just because it seems, and between the guy who tried to firebomb the ice camp, who was on the left, and he had a ghost gun, which malfunctioned, which means he built the lower receiver, and it's unregistered. It malfunctioned, thankfully, but he still lost his life because he was, attacking
armed at an ice camp.
Yes, and so it's clear to me that both sides are armed and irrational at this point, and desperate. And I don't know, the only thing that I can, literally all it takes for me is like, I could fucking sit and watch Tim Pool videos all day long about him telling me it's everything that's wrong with the fucking world, and it makes me not feel good. I feel like the world's fucking crumbling apart. And then I go outside, take my shirt off, get some sun, walk around, listen to music, come back, just make sure I take deep breaths.
That's a very gendered experience of you, to take your shirt off in public.
I cover my nipples, of course. Well, I'm non-binary, so I got a callback finally. But and then I don't feel the weight's less. You know what I mean? Like, because then you like see people, you interact with people of all races, all different colors, all genders, and everyone's mostly very nice and trying to do the right thing.
And I think you'll find that with most people. But the way we see it on TV and on Twitter is it's the opposite.
Everyone's reduced to an avatar.
Yeah.
No one is seen as a human being anymore. And I think that the more that we thought we were creating a connected society, we've made a completely disconnected one. And it fucking is coming to a fever pitch, I think. Yeah. And I don't know. It's like I felt like it was important to talk about this. From this angle of like this is not something that you should be using for a political argument.
No,
we have a crisis of purpose in this country. And I was telling Sean before this, like, I'm not a religious person, but it does strike me that through the advent of the internet and people kind of becoming more secular, I was hoping growing up that people would find purpose within themselves. And people seem to be unable to do that, and they create a new religion. Like social justice has original sin, and it has, if you're white, that's original sin. If you're a man, your original sin. It's like, and there's like doctrines and there's dogma, and people desperately need a religion. And so and it's so crazy to me because I feel like someone like Jordan Peterson was a bit of an antidote to this, but the media couldn't handle that. So he's this horrible transphobe, right-wing Christian thing, so many things that he's not, but they couldn't handle that existing, which strikes me as that they almost want the chaos because they care more about their ratings than they do about human life.
It's always that. It's always going to be greed in some way that brings media to do that.
My question to you, though, is are they going to ever start caring?
I think they're just going to have to disappear. I don't think there will ever be a point where they shift their programming to be beneficial to the human race. I think right now, picking a side is profitable.
Yeah.
And it will continue to be until those networks collapse. And they will not give up on that. And I think they will collapse eventually. We're moving more towards media like this, where you can just go to YouTube or go to any video platform and get the news you want to hear.
Right. Well, there's more
hopefully. Well, there's more personal accountability searching for the news you want to hear than there is just flipping on Fox or CNN.
But I mean, conversely, it's tough because, someone could stumble upon Jared Taylor, for example, who is smart, very articulate,
convincing,
but uses race science for ulterior motives. So it's like, again, it's like I don't really know what to do about these kinds of things other than like, I think the biggest problem is someone like Jared Taylor should be talked about for what he is. Like, you should talk about him that way. Say he's very smart, very articulate, and compelling, but misuses data for nefarious racist means.
Yeah.
And so, like, listen to him if you want to. But no, I'm telling you what he's doing honestly. Don't make it about Trump. Don't make it about politics. Just be like, this person is a little bit of an insidious danger and know what he's doing and then kind of move on. But don't make it into this fucking hit piece. Jared Taylor should exist. Jared Taylor should be allowed to speak. But you should combat his ideas with better ones.
Yeah.
And so I think that companies like Google, which is what makes me nervous about you even saying what you're saying, clearly has a bias, and they're clearly not interested in letting that happen. Like by deranking channels or just banning people completely outright. Like Soph is a creator we talked about before. Right. She made this a video about the LGBTQPPI whatever community, and she had some good takes, but it was mostly pretty shitty takes that were just from a 14-year-old who hasn't really been around a lot of gay people, I suspect, and doesn't really seem to feel a lot of empathy for them. And that's fine. She's 14. She's allowed to do that. Your concern is that she's convincing, but I don't know. But anyway, YouTube banned her completely off the platform. So that's not good. Like, she should be talking to people that challenge her ideas. Like, in fact, like, she had a thing on Twitter about going on Rogan. I would love that because I think Rogan would actually challenge her in the right ways. And perhaps she didn't even mean to put them in those terms exactly, and someone like him could force the reality out of her and kind of humanize that part of her that I saw as pretty dark in that video. But again, we're all reduced down to avatars. We're not seen as real people. And if we have, like, me being pro-gun, for example, people would see me as some right-wing zealot, even though literally everything else I believe in is pretty far left. But because it's just easier to distill me down to an avatar who is not a complex human like all of us are, with many complex, nuanced ideas, it just creates this toxic circle, this loop we're in that I don't really know how we get out of. And then unfortunately the loop breaks and we get mass shooters and people taking so many drugs they end up killing themselves. And there's just there's a crisis of purpose in this country, but we all have to pretend online that we have it all figured out.
Sure.
Which is such a bizarre dichotomy to watch in real time.
I mean, my concern with people like Jared Taylor and even Soph is that the vast majority of people, and I've said this before, and I think you've actually said this before, the vast majority of people need someone to tell them how to feel, how to act, what to believe. And the first convincing thing they hear, they will stick to.
That's very true.
And that's why I expressed my concern over Soph to you the last time before we did our podcast, because she is in a position where she has so much influence. Even though she is, and this is another thing, but even though she is, or she was on YouTube, which is not a mainstream platform, her subscriber count was what, 1 million at that point?
Almost, yeah.
Almost 1 million. She reaches so many people, and people are desperately looking for some kind of, I'll put finger quotes around sane explanation of what's going on, that they will listen to her and believe her right off the bat.
Even watching that video I watched, though, like, I don't believe that anything she said is going to make a dangerous person. And I think that that's important to know. Like, I think that a lot of it is sort of a pressure valve that sort of people need to get out of, like, again, because the narrative is so dominated by the opposite of what she's saying that I think that people like her, even if they're I'm not talking about Jared Taylor. That's not who I'm talking about. People like her, who younger people will listen to, are a bit of an important pressure valve, because that I think I do believe people like her will make people who feel as if they're not being listened to feel like they have a voice somewhere in someone like her. And she calls out a lot of flaws that we have. And that reminds me, so the video that I found her on was the one where she's criticizing Islam. And just to kind of make something really clear here, this is why you shouldn't trust the way the left is talking about this. And again, the right is fully worthy of all kinds of criticism. Trump with the boomer argument and the gamers thing, like, no one's handling this well. That I want to make that very clear. But the left is so dominant in the narrative of this, like, this white supremacy narrative. So here's, like, the way to think about it. Some of you might be too young to remember this. After 9/11, there was a big push on the left of not all Muslims, which is true, right? I think it's a shitty ideology, but I'm not going to blame over 1 billion people for believing in this. It's like, and I think out of that billion, most of them are not bad people. But isn't it interesting? The same media, all white people are bad. All white people are the problem. All white people are white supremacists. They are fully willing to dive into that, which would just make you question where their motives actually lie. Do they care about humans and how we're different and getting to an ideal place where we look different, we have sex different, and that's fine, and it's really nobody's business, and we shouldn't judge people based on those things? Or do you want to keep us divided so we keep fighting and we'll keep tuning in?
Yeah. I don't know. I think there is like a... God, it really has been disappointing to see how the media has handled this. But I think there is like a level of spirituality that we've lost. Moving away from the Christian right that you experienced in the 90s that I was born into the end of.
Any ideology, whether it be social justice or Christianity, having a dominant voice in a culture does not go well.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. It's just it's just that we've moved so far away from that far Christian ideology, and we've moved into a new one that does exactly the same thing, but has the guise of, this is secular. God isn't telling us what to do. This is our choice.
And what we're doing is good.
Exactly.
And if you're not doing what we're doing, you're bad. Mm-hmm. Which, again, is distilling the human experience down to nothing.
Yeah.
You're an avatar. You don't matter.
Yeah. And like you said, you had hoped for a period where people would look inward and find purpose in themselves. And a lot of that is lost. And even now we see it like it comes back into, we need something to tell us what to do. Regardless, we won't look at ourselves to make decisions,
right.
to have original thoughts, because it's so much easier to look outward at somebody who has 10,000 likes on Twitter because they're influential, they're powerful,
right.
and they say something that seems agreeable.
Right.
And you cling to that first thought.
And what's so crazy is that whenever you see, like, I think Seth MacFarlane had a tweet the other day, this is even before the shootings, that was just about like, hey guys, like we need to stop, he's a Democrat, trying to address the Democratic Party of like this infighting, this shit, this one-upsmanship, it's not working. He just got fucking bombarded.
Of course he did.
With other checkmark journalists. This is kind of an aside, but like the checkmark on Twitter is like a new class system that I am not okay with. Like it is everybody should get it. If you have your ID and your picture and you're using your real name, you should get a check mark.
Yeah.
This should not be relegated to an upper class of people.
Celebrities.
To celebrities and journalists.
Journalists with 500 followers.
Right.
Who have written one article.
But their shitty take will pop to the top because they
course.
have that fucking check mark. And it has created an online class system. It's disgusting.
And they have all of their constituents.
Yes.
And those are the people who follow their takes.
Yeah. And they're fucking mostly shitty fucking takes.
Terrible.
And what's so funny is the people that we actually think have good takes, like Shoe on Head, don't have a check mark.
Yeah.
Or Tim Dillon's verified, strangely enough. But anyway, I mean, I feel like we should read some of these comments. And then
Yeah,
just move
Maya
on.
made a comment about Utopia, and I think Kevin may have as well.
Yeah, go ahead and read all of them.
Let's see. So, gosh, I forget where it was.
Here, I got it. I always believe in
Yeah.
energies, and we are all connected. With every meeting, we either absorb, reflect, or create positive or negative energy. Be better when things feel like they are falling apart. Yeah, I think that's true. But the way that I always look at it is, so I used to do a lot of hard drugs when I was very young, right? And I went to a few 12-step programs when I quit. And there was like a level of religiosity to that too, but also me not resent. I didn't go to more than 2 of them. But I didn't resent the people who were in that because it made me realize, even at, I think I was 19, maybe even younger, that some people are so simple that the people that I saw in there that had no purpose would very easily become a neo-Nazi, for example. It's like they just needed somebody to tell them, hey, you're important. Your life is worth living. And like that environment was wholesome enough to where like that, I was grateful that they found that circle. So I think that we have to accept that humans are complex, but at the same time, a lot of humans are scared or unable to have their own. They need to be led, and so I think us as people who have a voice and can articulate ourselves well. And I know it's a bit of a brag, but I mean it's why I felt like I should even start this in the first place. I think that people need voices that are just telling them you're good. And you're okay. Actually, I wanted to give a shout out to something. I found this app yesterday, and it's called Wisdo, WISDO. Basically, you can join communities if you have bipolar disorder, or you're like suicidal, or you're gay, and then you take little like questionnaires about like what you have felt in the metrics of these groups, and then it'll connect you with a stranger that you can talk to. And I think and it's all wholesome and positive, and people just want to help, and they're usually feeling something too. So you can kind of commiserate, and I think that that's so important too. So Wisdo, I really recommend that if you're having these kinds of feelings.
Yeah.
If you're suicidal, obviously get help. And I know that's hard to do and scary, but if you're just not feeling good and you feel like your friends aren't understanding you, this is maybe that's kind of what it was for me. I was kind of like, well, I need to talk to somebody. I don't want to burden Sean with my thoughts on these things for a few hours, so I'm going to just talk to some strangers. And it was kind of nice. And I ended up helping somebody else who was struggling with some gay stuff. And so it felt good to help, and it felt good to be helped. And I think that, like, it's so funny. I was looking at Tulsi's stickers. So I kind of want to buy us some bumper stickers.
I would love that.
And one of them is one of the ones I want to buy is like, basically it says that service is the most important thing. Like be
not military service.
No, like service to your community.
Personal service.
Yes, yeah. And that's one thing I'm gonna get us. And but it just, I think that we've gotten away from that. We think that by tweeting or by Instagramming we are connecting to humans and doing them some kind of service, but it's the opposite. It's just making people resent you or again. Giving your hot political takes on Twitter makes them see you as the enemy, even though if they were to have a discussion with you face to face about it, your ideas may be more nuanced than they expected. Anyway, the next comment.
Yeah. Let's see. Tom says, do you guys have any thoughts on Twitter suspending Mitch McConnell's campaign's account? Their response to this truthfully makes some very good points about the bias being shown by Twitter in this.
I think the only thing I know about that is that he posted literally like the day after they posted, like, I don't know, it was something about Democrats, and it was, I even forgot what it was, but it wasn't related to the shooting, but it was like he posted this picture of like these tombstones, like but fake ones, like in a yard, and he was making some kind of statement about something, but the timing was just really bad and stupid. And I think it had something to do with that. he should have had some fucking self-awareness. I didn't know he got banned, but Mitch McConnell is somebody that I have hated long before Trump. So, and I still hate him now. So,
actually, a video came out recently of people protesting outside his house in the middle of the night. Did you see that?
No, but you shouldn't do that.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
Fucking stupid.
It makes your cause look bad,
and it makes him a martyr, and it also gives them a reason to be like, oh look, there's violence against us, and
right.
And I think really the only one that gets to talk like that is Steve Scalise, who I also don't like, but he did get nearly fucking shot to death. I mean, he almost died after he got shot at the congressional baseball game, and he's someone that can't speak on this by some political zealot on the other side that like decided, well, instead of having better ideas, and I'm so desperate, and this person is the enemy, I'm going to just go and shoot him. And Gabrielle Giffords too is another one who same thing happened, and fortunately she's so mentally, because she got shot in the head and survived. Jesus. And so she's so mentally disabled now that she can't really even speak anymore. I mean, she can, but she's very deficient, unfortunately. So yeah, so I don't know, Tom. I don't know. Yeah, I figured. I don't really care. I don't know, but politics is just kind of out of this one for me personally. And this seems to be the only story that's kind of dominated anything else, and anything else has just sort of gone into the ether, so I'm not thinking about it. Kevin asked me, what about stricter gun laws and background checks? I don't really think it's pertinent to this. I maybe we'll get to that discussion at some point, but there's like 10 discussions that need to happen before we even get there.
Sure.
And most states do background checks. Most of these people who buy these weapons, who commit these things, pass them. So I don't really know what you like. The problem with stricter gun control laws or background check laws is it borders into having to divulge your mental health history to the example I always give is Equifax. We couldn't even trust Equifax, which we didn't even give them our social security number, and they got hacked and all that shit got leaked. So I don't really trust a government entity knowing what medications I'm taking, what I've been diagnosed with. I do think that if you get institutionalized, that's maybe something that should set up some sort of issue, or domestic violence. Those are two things in which I think that you should have problems. But the reality is these people, if you haven't committed a felony, which they hadn't at that point, it's kind of fair game.
Yeah,
so,
I don't know, but so many times we've missed reports, or we've missed something like being indicated to the police.
But that this isn't even relegated to these shooters. I mean, the same thing with the Boston bombers. Like they knew, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so
why don't we take these things seriously?
But they do get thwarted often. It's just you're not going to hear that story. You know what I mean? It's just you're going to hear about the ones where they're successful. You know, like in fact, like there was another one that was about to happen. Another literally a copycat person, which is I think why the media is so dangerous in this, is because copycat thing is real. And his grandmother noticed, or maybe grandfather or grandmother noticed a problem in something that he was saying, reported him, and she thwarted the whole thing from happening.
Yeah. I saw that one. Yeah.
So again, I mean, it's like pay attention to the people around you, and if you feel like something like this or these thoughts are being had by the people that are important to you, don't be afraid to do something about it, because I think that people are in a really desperate state right now, and especially people that you know that are increasingly isolating themselves but are also saying or posting things that are giving you pause. It's not to be ignored anymore. Mm-hmm. But again, making this into... The problem is that the gun argument is intrinsically a political argument.
Yeah.
And I feel like it is not pertinent right now. Like,
right.
And anybody on...
I agree. I totally agree.
Anybody who's talking about that, they do not care. They just think that if they use guns as the simple explanation, that their simple base will follow along, mm-hmm. and many of them do. But it's a simple... Similar to religion, you need like a simple explanation for a complicated problem. And I think that we just need to have more curiosity and more empathy for just humanity as a whole, and understand that people, like Tucker said, like understand that people are suffering, but they're mostly good people, and just calm down.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I was talking to Maya yesterday, and we were talking about suffering and personal suffering, and you and I have had this conversation before. There's a level of personal suffering that turns you into like an empath, really into feeling for other people.
Sure.
And especially people who are in sort of like sexual minorities like we are, or racial minorities. It puts you through a level of personal suffering trying to find your identity, growing up in a southern state, and sort of feeling a pressure on yourself and suffering internally and not being able to express that makes you a person more likely to feel for other people.
Sure.
And we've lost so much of that, I think, because of the internet. I think the internet has made us not have to really suffer. There's communities for all of us.
And I think too, but it's also this, I think a lot of it's identity politics, or like weaponizing your identity. Because it makes people, like, there's a period in time, like even I've been guilty of this thing of like, 10, 15 years ago or 10 years ago, because this has really happened very fast, which I think is why people don't really recognize that it's kind of it's such a massive phenomenon. But like someone would talk about, like I would make a statement that's maybe ignorant about slavery, or like maybe just dismissive or something. I'm kind of giving an example. And then people would be like, well, it really was only about 150 years ago. And like, there's still like all these different ramifications. Or like, one of the big ones for me was like how housing was still a massively discriminatory issue until like even the 80s. And you're like, Jesus Christ, like, okay, like I can understand these sorts of things. But like now, because it's like, so you go, like as a white person, you go, okay, God, like I understand, and I'm here to kind of do whatever I can do to make that better, because I feel empathy for you, because even if you're not in a minority, everyone has suffered in some. It's part of the human condition, right? But now that like your suffering gives you points,
right?
That is a fucking problem.
So much so that you're willing to emulate suffering to gain points.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Point of personal privilege. Exactly.
Yeah.